I would say if I do, it's not intentional or it's not like the main focus. I think for me, like focus more on the visual of the action, if there is any action. I do still read it in my voice. So like, and I think that's probably why. It's because I'm reading it in my own personal voice and then I'm attaching the visuals to that. So the audio gets messed up because it's like having two audio channels open and my brain has a hard time kind of doing that.
If you enjoy this podcast, show us some love and take a couple minutes to leave a 5-star review. It helps us get found by more listeners, and we greatly appreciate it. Aphantasia is a condition characterized by an inability to visualize mental images in one's mind. If you have just discovered that you or someone you love has aphantasia, or if you're just fascinated by the subject in general and love learning more about it, you are in the right place. The Discovering Your Mind podcast delves into all aspects of the mind's eye, including aphantasia, hyperphantasia, and everything in between. Welcome to the Discovering Your Mind podcast, brought to you by shanesbraindomain.com. I am your host, Shane Williams, also known as Shane's Brain. Enjoy part 2 of Discovering the Mind of Brett Kelley.
All right, now we're going to talk a little bit more about mind audio.
Yeah.
And I want to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to give you 4 phrases and you can tell me if they mean the same thing to you, or if not, explain why not. Okay?
Certainly.
So the 4 phrases are inner voice, inner monologue, inner dialogue, and self-talk. Are those interchangeable or do they mean different things to you?
I can't tell if this is just my brain naturally doing it my brain is either just enjoying the nature of this exercise, is scared that it doesn't want to be wrong, and also the deep-rooted need to be accepted and not rejected. Basically, those are the 3 things that are at war in my brain right now. Yeah,
there are no right or wrong answers, just so you know.
Sure. So in which case I will lean on my first one, which is the enjoyment of the exercise. So because of that, my brain is going, okay, I can find different versions of the 4. My brain immediately likens inner voice to being like your conscience, having it being much more like a personal, like a sacred thing. Like your inner voice is kind of like you speaking to yourself. Your inner monologue would be like me talking at myself, at my brain, basically, at least from my interpretation upon the first gut check reaction of what you had said. Then was the inner dialogue. Was that the 3rd one?
Yes.
Yes, inner dialogue. That one for me is like going back to what we were talking about of me coming up with like scenarios in my head, or having like 2 characters talk, or like the cartoon show we mentioned, or Genevieve's house. Like that for me is the inner dialogue of like me not necessarily me observing conversation happening between 2 people or 2 or plus more people, but I'm not necessarily participating in it. I'm just viewing it. Self-talk sounds more for me is like me hyping myself up, or just interacting, or yelling at my brain. Like that's like the more aggressive coin flip of the inner voice versus self-talk. Self-talk feels more like I have more association with that being like, yeah, hyping yourself up, or like don't mess this up, or like adding stress on myself, or trying to or even just to self-care or self-love, if you will, or just the talking to yourself, the talk that you do it to yourself in the mirror if when you feel down, or you need to like have that face-to-face with yourself. That's like my 4 interpretations of those for sure.
Okay. I like it. All right. So when those things are happening, an inner monologue, whatever it is, do you actually hear it? And is it in your voice?
Inner voice, yes. It's my voice talking to me, or maybe because like I don't know, because actually you just presented a really interesting thing. Like when I'm talking to myself in my voice, do I actually hear my own voice? That'll keep me up for a while. But I guess, yeah, I mean, it's still my voice because I recognize it as my own, even though it might not necessarily come out as that. But when it comes to like the conscious talk or whatever, but when I'm doing inner talk, when I'm talking to my voice, or I'm hyping myself up, it is purposely my voice because I'm trying to talk to myself. So yes, the inner dialogue I associate with other people. So no, The inner monologue, yes, it is my voice for sure.
Can you identify the pitch and tone of the voice or the voices in your mind?
Yes. Yeah, but it's also the same creative button though, where it's just like, oh, what voice do I want to hear? What voice sounds it? Unless it's a memory, in which case, when it's a memory, I can still remember everything. Or if I'll go back and I'll go back to a memory, and then I will be able to uncover being like, oh, that's what they meant, or oh, that's what that tone meant. So yeah, like I can definitely discern from voices for sure.
Okay. So do you play out conversations in your mind?
Yes, way more than I probably should as a functioning member of society.
Okay. And so you can actually hear the other person's voice in their voice.
Yes.
Okay.
Although actually, even to amend that, it's not not to push it as saying like I hear voices and I don't know what they say and I can't control what they say. I'm not in that realm of that type of experience. Whenever I hear voices, they're definitely still coming from the same vessel that drives my own voice. I just feel like I feel like that should be an interesting point of clarity to make. So what I mean by that is that to make the distinction of where like what to differentiate myself from the distinction of I can make voices, I can hear voices in my head, as opposed to like I can hear different people's voices in my head where like I can envision a conversation happening between a mother and a father, or Genevieve and Genevieve's daughter in the front lawn of their house. And those voices are not mine, but they are definitely saying and interacting in ways that I'm designing. Like they're reading off of a script that I wrote. As opposed to there's a voice named Genevieve in my head and she's saying some weird stuff that I don't feel comfortable repeating to other people. I don't have that.
Right. Okay. I understand what you mean.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So is there always something audible going on in your mind? Does the audible ever shut off?
Yeah. You know what? And I never even thought that. Once again, I'm glad that I like this conversation because it's the back and forth where like all of a sudden I'm like, oh yeah, no, I can. It's making me become aware of things that I didn't even realize I was aware of. So that's why I'm drawing a lot of enjoyment out of this. So yes, when I focus on things, which is where, shocker to no one, I was diagnosed with attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder when I was 7, and then I was re-diagnosed when I was 37. So by a psychologist, just to make sure that although I think anyone who is well versed in that aspect probably could have figured out in my introductory hellos, but yeah, so that's kind of the other aspect of that. All that to say that of course, like one of the things that makes that more under control is when I'm doing physical activity or I'm hyper focusing on something like a remedial task, like doing the same thing over and over again, which is why I really did well in martial arts, because martial arts is really just training your body by doing the same thing over and over again, which means you're just focusing on one thing and you're corralling your brain, and instead of it flying all over the place and going in all these different alcoves, you're just finding peace in that singular action, which is why I did really well doing stunt work, because it's doing choreography. It's learning how to do a thing and then executing it to your best ability over and over again, and finding peace in that, as opposed to the cacophony that's going on in my head if I'm just left to my own devices with nothing to go. Even worse when I got sugar. So yeah.
Right. Okay. So the martial arts and those kind of things helps you quiet the mind.
Yes. I was on Ritalin at a very young age for a very long time. And it was, I was diagnosed at an age where there was still a lot of stigma around that type of stuff, where, 7 years old, put me around 1990, not exactly the most aware time for that type of stuff. Like I immediately got lumped in like, oh, Brett's the psycho kid that's on drugs. Like don't talk to him. So yeah. So growing up with that, I immediately just wanted to get away from Ritalin as well. And I had stomach issues with it. So the one thing that we ended up finding through trial and error was physical activity, just getting out, burning it off. And then, So because of that, I was able to get off Ritalin, and then I just stuck with that as long as I could. And that kind of gave me a little bit of peace. And then as I grew up and had to get big boy jobs, office jobs, I would regress back, and then it took a long time to recalibrate.
Are sounds automatically attached to your visualization, or are they optional?
Optional. Definitely optional.
Okay. So when it comes to mind audio, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much does it resemble reality or actual hearing?
Varies, I would say, depending on, once again, depending on the mood, my mood, depending on what I'm doing, depending on how I'm feeling, depending on what I want to hear and what my brain wants to hear in the moment. But because of the fact that I grew up also just spending a lot of time alone, I had a big refuge in music. So most of my visual and audio comes from obviously speech, but then also music, and not just like hearing lyrics, but also just making up my own music and just knowing and having a familiarity and building that familiarity. But yeah, so I would say like on a scale of 1 to 10, probably 8 to 9. Like not pitch perfect, but like pretty good.
All right. So I want you to imagine a song that involves multiple instruments and vocals.
You got it.
Can you hear all of the instruments or just some of them?
Kind of like going back to the visualization of multiple things, where my brain can skip between the 3 different things and the vocals. If I'm making something up that doesn't exist yet, my brain can only piece certain things. Like I can piece the drums for some reason, because I've been listening to a podcast that has like a lot of horns in the intro. My brain thinks to the horns of a trombone, and then the lead singer singing kind of like right off the head. Like the song that I'm thinking of in my head is very bluesy, jazzy, kind of like lounge Mad Men type of thing. So like I have like the nice like dusty kind of like light drums, and then I have like the trombone kind of going off in the distance, going a little bit of a thing, and then like a little bit of and then the kind of like the classic like bluesy like doo-wop kind of vibe of like the guy singing. Thinking of all those things, like my brain will not play it as one track. It's almost like the 3 things are like on 3 different wavelengths, and then the more I focus in and try and listen to the actual song, one of those things will drop, and then the other thing will stand to the forefront, if that makes any sense.
So you're not listening to a song that you know, you're just creating a song out of thin air.
In this particular instance, yes. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, I can also go back and like, man, I really like the song by Boy Hits Car, which is like a ridiculously obscure nu metal band from like the 2000s that they didn't get their dues. They're a really good band, and I've listened to their songs a million times. I still have that in my head, and I can listen to that whole song uninterrupted, no problem in my head. Yeah, but it's in short second bursts. Like I can't listen to it like I'm opening up a YouTube clip, but like it's like a TikTok, honestly. And I hate saying that. I don't even have a TikTok account, but I know enough that it's like it plays like a TikTok where I'm like it hits let's get connected, and then the entire song from like there, and then my brain will get bored and trail off, and then I'll have to revisit it to kickstart it again. But that's with music that I know that already exists. If I'm making stuff up on the fly, like my brain can kind of piece together and ramshackle it, and then I'd have to like really focus and like really like synchronize it. And then if I wanted to really play it, I'd have to like put it together on like a GarageBand or something, and then be able to listen to the whole thing. And it would still sound bad because I'm not like I love music, but I don't count myself a musician. Like I can kind of fake being a musician, but so yeah, not to the point where I can make a completely composed piece of music that exists outside of my head.
Okay. So if you're thinking of that song, what did you say it was? The one you liked?
Oh, Connected by Boy Hits Car.
Okay. So if you're thinking of that song in particular, can you change the tempo by speeding it up and slowing it down?
I can, but I would never do it. The only reason I'm doing it now is because you suggested it. I've never thought of doing that before.
Okay.
But I can a little bit, like, yeah. So
can you adjust the volume?
Yes. Like to the point where like I'm remembering how you feel like when you're at when you're young and dumb and you go to a heavy metal concert and you're like, oh, what are earplugs? I'll be fine. I'll stand by the speaker. No one's standing there. I get the best spot in the house. And then you wake up and you're like, oh, I have cotton balls in my ears now.
Right.
Like I can recall that sensation.
Okay. Can you imagine switching instruments in and out? For example, could you hear a guitar as a trumpet?
Yes. That's
Really?
it's making me laugh because it's it's a new metal song, so you can imagine has very janky, erratic bass lines and guitar riffs. So to have those be over a trombone is hilarious. It's amazing.
That's really cool. Can you make the singer sound deeper and higher at will?
Yes. And as an example, like my brain's going, oh, lower. So it's almost like I would substitute it out for like an example, like for lower, my brain will pitch it down to Dave Grohl's interpretation of the devil and Beelzebub's and Tenacious D's The Pick of Destiny. To punch it up, Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So like I can kind of like explore that, but in order to find like the anchor point to it to make it like stay, like I have to pull something that I have a reference for and then kind of pin it to that. In this instance, yeah.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about the other senses a little bit.
Sure.
So I want you to visualize that you were at a movie theater concession stand and they hand you a big tub of freshly popped buttery popcorn. Can you smell it in your mind?
Yes. The first thing that pops into my mind is that I can smell like the classic like warm butter scent, like it just as a glossy. But then my brain goes, well, what if the popcorn's burnt? And then it smelled burnt popcorn. That doesn't smell good. But yeah, generally, and I can also like recall I'm holding it, and in my head visualization, it's the classic like cartoony square, which is weird because they don't make those anymore. But that one, like that has more of like a paper quality I can sense on my fingers. But then I'm also remembering like, oh no, it's a classic like round tub, and that has more like a plasticky sensation. My brain can recall that.
Okay. On that scale from 1 to 10, how much is it like actual smelling?
The smell lower. Like I know, like I've been getting all hoity-toity saying like, oh, 7 or 8, 8 or 9. This one's like the tactical sense, and this is much lower, like 4 or 5 from 1 to 10, like half.
Okay. What about taste? Can you taste it in your mind?
I can, but it's a 4 to 5. Like I have to really focus on it. Like it's not easy. Yeah.
What about the sense of touch? Can you feel the popcorn in your hands or in your mouth?
Yes.
Okay. What's that one on the scale?
Yeah, that was probably like closer to 6 or 7.
In this episode, we will be referring to the carnival picture. If you would like to view the carnival picture to play along and better understand what we're talking about, you can find it at shanesbraindomain.com in the Aphantasia section. If you are unable to view the carnival picture, it is a picture of a carnival at dusk with bright lights adorning carnival games and rides, including a large Ferris wheel, with many people walking around.
All right. Do you have that carnival picture handy that I sent you?
I do.
Can you put yourself in that picture?
You know what? It's I'm kind of giddy laughing to myself because I was asking myself leading up to this when I was like, you asked me for the picture. I'm like, oh, like I was like, what's he going to ask? Like, oh, is he going to ask me to visualize myself as if I'm in one of the gondolas overlooking the carnival? In which case, I can see it from the point of view, like as a prime example, like the person on the left, like the woman in the red, like facing the kiosk on the left. Like I can see the kiosk from that person's point of view as if I'm walking down, and all of a sudden it's kind of on my left side, walking down the midway.
Okay. So it's kind of like you're there.
Yes, I can mentally create what I think it would be like to be in that position. Yes.
Okay. So can you walk around and explore?
I can, kind of, like in a Wolfenstein or like a first gen Doom kind of way.
Okay.
Or like I can make up the details on my own as I do it. But like standing there, I can get the space. Now we're back up to like the room and the room and then space outside the room. Like I can put myself in the space and be aware of it, but then moving around in it gets a little blurry. It's almost like buffering. Like my brain takes a second to remake and capture it up. It's not quite like walking around a room that exists. It takes a minute.
Okay. Can you feel the night air or experience the temperature of the setting?
Yes. I mean, I can do it much easier now just because we're kind of in the weather that I visualize what it would be like right now. So it's easier for my brain to be like, oh yeah, it's nice and warm and there's mildly sweaty and it's a little humid. Yeah, like I can get there because I'm already there. I can also imagine it being like a fall carnival and where it's like you have like the nice crispness in the air and like the air is kind of a little bit electric and you can smell the dead leaves in the air. That's like my favorite feeling. I'm a big Halloween kid. I can definitely call myself back to that memory and put it in this context.
What about the sounds? Can you experience the sounds?
Yes. Hearing people on rides whiz by and people screaming and laughing and hooting and hollering and all that fun stuff and the running of the sandals on concrete by you and stuff like that on the hot sun. I'm relying heavily on my memory. I can still try and like place myself as like, this is a place where I've never been before. So, I'm trying to visualize it as like, oh, what's further down the midway? Like, I don't know what that white structure is kind of dead center right over, but it looks like it could be like the entrance to a bounce house that I've never seen before. Or it could be a ticket kiosk to a ride that I've never been on.
Okay. So do you experience all those senses and sensations at the same time or one at a time?
It kind of exists almost like a background noise. And in order for me to experience one like fully, I really have to like kind of click and enhance for that experience. Like I can put myself in that and I can do that, but it's almost like it's too much for my brain. So in order for me to kind of settle into any one experience, I really kind of have to focus in, like zoom in on it a little bit. Okay. The more info that comes up, the more it kind of collapses into the white noise. It still exists, but it's not nearly as vivid or real. Like it becomes more real the more I like focus in on like an exact point or moment or sensation.
All right, now we're going to talk about reading. When you read a novel, is it like a movie in your mind or something else?
That's really interesting. I try to make it a movie, but I must regrettably say that most of my habits with reading are either deal with social media, which doesn't necessarily imply a lot of narrative depending on what I'm reading, or I read a lot of comic books, so I have the visuals to accompany it. In the rare occasions where I really get to sink my teeth into a book, I do try and do like the movie scenario thing, or I try and like screenplay it. Like I can get there, but it's not like as easy as me just envisioning or like problem solving in my head. It's similar, but not the same, if that makes sense.
So when you're doing that, when you're trying to create that movie, when reading a book, how well can you visualize the characters and the surroundings? Is it super detailed or kind of vague?
Depends on the book and how specific they get with their descriptions. If they're vague, then I will definitely try and fill them in on my own, which I like. That's kind of like, how some people, how you have the argument of like some people are like, oh, no, you should totally just don't make a movie out of this. Just keep it as a book because it's written in such a way that everyone can interpret it their own way. And there's the beauty in that of allowing that personal interpretation. So I try to do that as best I can because I think that's a big thing of like how making something that can be made available to everyone, but how you can still make that experience yours, by being allowed to not be influenced by the outside world or even be working within the confines of the influence of the book itself. So yeah, okay. I try and piece things together as uniquely as I can from my own mind's eye.
When you're reading, do you hear the sounds and voices in your mind as well?
Thinking back to like the last couple of books that I've read, I would say if I do, it's not intentional or it's not like the main focus. I think for me, like focus more on the visual of the action, if there is any action. I do still read it in my voice. So like, and I think that's probably why. It's because I'm reading it in my own personal voice and then I'm attaching the visuals to that. So the audio gets messed up because it's like having two audio channels open and my brain has a hard time kind of doing that.
Do you experience any of the other senses in your mind when you read? Taste, smell, or touch?
Yes. I think when I'm reading, depending on the story, if the story wants me to experience those things and if they describe things in a very specific way, then yes. Because I also, another one of the endless hobbies that I do a lot of role-playing games. Like I played Dungeons and Dragons with my girlfriend. She's a dungeon master too, and like one of the big things that I like is that like explaining things in the five senses, where like, oh, you walk into a bar and you have this, it's an old bar, it's very dimly lit, so you can kind of make out shapes and forms and all that. I like describing things that attack the five senses. So when I read a book, if they describe the five senses, I do try and incorporate that. But unless the book is specifically identifying those things, I might not necessarily do that. I might be solely focused on what the book is telling me and then deriving what I can from that.
What about audiobooks? Do you ever listen to audiobooks?
No, I'm real bad. I do better holding my attention with like a podcast where you have more than one or two people talking. If you're hearing one author for like hours on end, it'll just, over a prolonged enough time, it'll just turn into the Charlie Brown wah 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 wah, and I'll just be like,
Okay.
My brain will all of a sudden, all the thoughts that I'm pushing off will just shove right in and just be like, hey, yeah, this book's really good, but hey, let's talk about like, hey, let's think about like this horrible thing. Like, what are we stressing out about? That's going to happen tomorrow, eh? So yeah. Audiobooks do not do a good job of staving that off. Podcasts for me do, and listening to music does.
Things are pleasant in the little town of Quiet until Mel Beezer discovers he's allergic to his own sneezes. Blending wit and humor with lively imagery, The Endless Achoo is a delightfully clever tale, available on shanesbraindomain.com and Amazon.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit about sleep and dreams, which we've already touched on a little bit, but
Yeah,
I want to ask you some more about it.
sure.
What does the phrase counting sheep mean to you?
Counting sheep is a good start. A good start, because once again, because I know a lot of people think of the repetition, and not to go into too deep into story time, but like I have a very root core memory about this of like I want to say 5 or 6 years old. I might have even been younger, but I remember just my poor parents, like midnight or whatever. My parents been sound asleep for hours. Me, young, very young, knee high to a grasshopper, crawling up to bed, poking my mother in the face, being like, "I can't sleep," and my mother saying, "Count sheep, go to sleep. Count sheep, just go to bed. Close your eyes, count sheep, and you go to sleep." And I remember going to my bed, trying to count sheep, getting to 2 or 3, and my brain just not being like, "I'm bored. I can't think past the 3rd sheep," not because I'm sleepy. It's just because my brain just starts thinking of other things. And then I get back out of bed, go over to my mom. I just go, "Counting sheep didn't work. It's not working, Mom. What happened?" She goes, "Well, what do you want to think of?" She goes, and I'll never forget this. My mom goes, "Think of a mouse playing the violin." And I go, "Okay." So then I run all the way back to my bed, like down the hall, other room. And it's actually one of the first few times where I remember being able to vividly remembering, like as if I'm watching a television, small gray mouse, nice tuxedo suit, balancing on a ball, playing violin. Opened up my eyes and I was so excited that I woke myself back up, ran back to my mom's room, poked her in the face and said, "It worked." My poor mother just being like, "That's great. Go see what else he's gonna do. What else is he gonna do? Just go. Just keep going back." Yeah.
Are your dreams in first person or third person?
It varies. Most of the time, they're first person. Like they're happening to me. I'm experiencing something happening in a very specific context. However, I also have had dreams where like I'm watching something happening as if it's a movie, where I don't feel like it's happening to me personally, but I'm watching something happen as if like I'm like the fly on the wall, which technically the fly on the wall is still first person. So I know it's kind of a weird discrepancy. Like like I'm watching things in the first person, but I don't feel like it's happening to me. But I can also see things happening in a first person perspective, and I can go, "This is not me." Yeah, I experience both of those things for sure.
When you're dreaming, do you know you're dreaming?
Yeah, sometimes I'll have dreams where they're very vivid, where I will think that they're happening to me in real life. And then other times there are dreams that are happening and they are occurring in ways where I am aware that it is a dream. When they're nightmares, I have a hard time telling that they're a dream. If they're funny or silly or abstract or different, like, your dream where like I have a lot of dreams where I'm defying gravity, or at least I used to, where like not necessarily where I'm flying, but like I used to have this recurring dream where I would be able to like old school Superman and like leap and bound. Like I was able to like take 3 jumps and I'd be able to jump and I would be like 50 feet in the air, like drop, over a single over a, tall building in a single bound type of thing. And I remember in those moments having fun but then also recognizing in the moment where I'm like, this isn't real. I can't do this. I wish I could. This is super fun. This is great, but like, I know this isn't real. And generally upon the realization that it's a dream, I wake up.
Is your dream experience different from how you visualize when you're awake?
Yes. I would say, depending on what the scenario is, it's more vivid, more fluid. Like I can hold the idea longer. When I'm awake and I can visualize things, like it's in short bursts, as I mentioned, like the puddle and the lake and all that stuff. Like it's very temporary. But with the dreams, I can be locked into a dream that'll feel like hours or longer.
We've talked a lot about memory, but I want to ask you a couple more questions about your memory. Does it feel like you're reliving the experience or something else?
It depends on the memory. Unfortunately, the memories that I tend to find myself reliving are the negative ones. And I don't know why. Like I generally try to be like, I'm generally like a pretty happy-go-lucky person, but I think it's just like the brain's hardwired to try and like spot trouble and fix problems.
How would you describe how your mind stores information?
It depends. Like if you're talking about memories, like those almost kind of function as like they're filed away in a cabinet or like a junk drawer or like a junk drawer where I can be like, even though they might not be like in great order, I can recall it really quickly. I can like an order in a deli. I can be like, pull up the time I was bullied in third grade for, police. And I'll be like, order up, boom, like make it and then just push it out, that type of thing.
Oh, cool.
Actually, just earlier today, a friend of mine was like, hey, do you remember 20 years ago when we were doing the stunt show and so, got into that bike accident? And I'm like, oh yeah, like that's more of like a filing cabinet. Like if I'm given the cues, my brain can go, oh, okay, time frame, time of day, when that happens. And then I can access it. Either it pulls it, not quite like pulls out like a folder, but like a television, like I'm scanning a TV screen.
Wow, that is really cool.
Yeah, yeah. But like I said, I mean, and actually this is another thing where in anticipation of me being like, oh, what are we going to talk about? And I was like, oh, like, because I did a little bit of research on Aphantasia. I found Aphantasia Network on YouTube, really fun YouTube channel. Watching it, I'm just like, Aphantasia, like what are the good things about that? I'm like, you know what? I bet people with aphantasia don't spend as much time obsessing about mistakes and bad memories. And I can definitely say without question, that is a thing that I deal with, and it affects me in ways that aren't pleasant. So, and a lot of it is just having to like train my brain, like meditation. I have to train myself to step away or distract myself from doing that. Because like, I'll tell you right now, talking about sleep, going back to that, hardest time about going to sleep is that when I'm not thinking about anything, my brain goes to problem solving mode. And if there's nothing to solve immediately that's entertaining, my brain will immediately go to, hey, remember that bad thing that happened? Remember, we're never going to do that bad thing ever again. Like, remember that mistake you made? Remember how sad or how mad that person was because of a thing you did because you weren't being self-aware or you weren't thinking of the other person. Like, my brain goes, yep, I remember it. Yep, it's like it's just happening. Like this thing that happened, like this, or this breakup that happened that was devastating when I was like 15. Like I can still access that memory like it's tomorrow, and it'll play like a TV where like it'll happen where like I don't even want to keep living in this moment because I've lived it, and I'll argue with myself. I'll have like little therapy sessions in my brain where I'm just like, I don't want to think about this. I don't want to feel these feelings anymore. Like we've been over this, because I'll have to work myself out of it again, as if I haven't already had this conversation a million times. Where I'm like, I have to like sit myself down where I have to talk to myself, let inner monologue, or like even the inner voice where I'm having to yell at myself, where I'm like, okay, you're having the bad feeling. You're having the bad memory now. We've discussed this. We get to this conclusion. We go through all the different opportunities. You realize that you made your mistakes. The person made their mistakes. Are you both mad at each other anymore? No? Okay, then that means that we're pretty much over this, right? Yeah. So maybe we don't need to keep remembering how bad we feel after this, right? Yeah. Because we pulled all the data out of this already, right? Yeah. Okay, so maybe we can think of something else? Okay. Let's think of ice cream, I guess. Yeah, so you have that. And like, so, for all the things that people can be like, oh, I wish I could remember everything like that. That is definitely the hard part of like, of having that vivid imagination allows self-torture to be so vibrant and imaginative, because like, you can come up with a lot of great ideas, but then when you get worried, your brain comes up with also some of the worst possible ideas ever. And then your brain immediately goes into recovery, being like safety mode, being like, oh no, what if the worst thing happens? Let's think of what the worst possible thing can happen, and let's just anticipate that happening, so that way we can at least anticipate it, so that way if it happens, we'll at least prepare for it, even though that thing is probably the least possible outcome. Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, I can only speak for myself because, everyone with aphantasia is different as well.
Sure.
We're not all alike, but yeah, I can't really relate to that. I can't say it never happens. Like I'll have those experiences where I'll worry about something, or I'll, think about a past mistake or something, but it's not front and center. It's like it's in another room. And so it's kind of quiet and easy to move on from.
If you've ever dissociated without knowing that what you were doing was dissociating, like that was a very strange day where I realized, where I was like, oh, that thing where I get tunnel vision and I just get, and all of a sudden, like the rest of the world just kind of falls away. And all of a sudden I'm in this moment, hyper focusing on this exact point, just trying to get through it, of stress and anxiety or whatever. Brain just having a hard time just comparing to whatever extreme stressor feelings are happening in this moment. And then all of a sudden, like at 35, being like, oh yeah, that's just the thing that happens, and then someone be like, no, that's a dissociative episode. It's because you were so wrapped up in your head that your brain just kind of turned off reality for a little bit. You just kind of were like in your own dimension. And I was like, oh, that's what dissociation is. Oh wow, okay, cool. All right, I'm gonna have to reorganize a whole bunch of stuff then. Oh boy. So yeah, I mean, and I don't know if hyperphantasia is something that feeds into that, or if that's just something that comes with the territory, or maybe I might be confusing conditions and different ways how the brain works. But yeah, 0 out of 5 stars. Do not recommend.
All right. Do you associate your mind with an area or a space?
No, actually, no, not immediately. No, I think I still associate my brain being like in here, or like even just a nebulous thing. Like my brain is kind of like my brain is the car that takes me to the places that I want to go, if that makes sense. Like my brain isn't the place where I stay. It's the vehicle in which I use to go places.
Oh, wow.
Like almost like a secondary tool, if you will.
Okay. I like that description. Does how you visualize affect how you perform in your career or your hobbies?
Yes, generally in a positive way, for sure. And it's kind of one of those weird things where like I'm a visual learner, which is also kind of strange because I know, I have this vivid imagination. How come I have to be a visual learner? Can't I just describe it and then figure it out? The problem where that falls with me is that I think of too many different ways that it can be done. If you tell me to, push the cart over to the wall, my brain immediately goes, what are the 5,000 different, like, the old school, like, this is an exercise I did in grade school. I don't know if everyone else did it, but where you do the exercise of like, you take out a piece of paper and you write how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and then you hand it to the teacher, and then the teacher tries to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in front of the class using everyone's things, and then they purposefully like do it in the most, you take out the bread and the peanut butter. Okay, cool. You put the peanut butter on the bread. Okay, so I'm going to take the peanut butter jar. I'm going to put it on the bread. No. You take the peanut butter out of the jar. That's not what it says. Like my brain does that all the time. My brain just goes, what are the different interpretations of like, take this thing and put it against the wall. All right, well, where against the wall? Do you want it to be put it in the center, or like, do you want to really jacked up against the wall, or do you need it? Like, do you need some space, or like, how fragile is it? So like, yeah, my brain gets plagued by that stuff a lot. I don't even know if that answers the question you asked. I'm sorry.
I don't either, but it was cool. I like that.
But that's what it is. It's like trying to visualize for work. Is that where it works against me when I'm at work? It works for me at work when I'm being creative in hobbies, because like it helps me visualize and give me approximations to work towards. But yeah, like, and it's also like exercise. Like, my brain's a tool. Like it does whatever it wants, but depending on what I'm doing, I can adapt, and I can also train my brain to prepare and create the habits necessary for it to function better, so that way it's better at work. Like I've been doing an office job for the last 2 years, which is the antithesis of what I've always done. So it had an adjustment period, and now I can sit for hours at a time, focus. If my brain's engaged, then I can definitely be much more functional. It's when the things happen where my brain is not engaged is when it's a nightmare for me. And I don't know how much my imagination partakes in that, but I feel like it has to be part of it. Like if my brain can trick myself into being engaged, and I can do that through my imagination, then it can be helpful at work. Sometimes if work's just a misery, then my brain will just shut off and go somewhere else. So yeah, it helps and hurts.
Okay. Did you do well in school or did you struggle?
I did well in school, but I struggled to do well. Like school was not easy for me. School was definitely tough. Like I had a lot of sociological hang-ups and like hurdles to cross in terms of like everything. So like I didn't have a lot of good friends going to school. Like I would say I started getting my act together and realizing like figuring out how to do school well when I hit like high school. Like in middle school, my grades were kind of all over the place. Like if the class engaged me and if I did well in it and I got something out of doing well in it, then I would generally do well in it. And then in college, like when I was doing my exploratory classes, I was really good. When I was doing art, because I got my Bachelor's of Fine Art in Illustration from the University of Connecticut, which is kind of an atypical place you'd get an art degree in, but it worked out. In order to go to UConn, I also had to get a degree from the university proper. So I had to take a lot of classes that I just couldn't do. So like, I would be killing it in like, life drawing and like graphic design and illustration and wet media or mixed media or digital media. Like I would do those pretty well. But then you'd plump me into like a science class and I had to calculate the amount of potential kinetic joules in a 5 kilogram jelly donut. And then my brain would just be like, is my ear a window? Because I'm gonna jump out of it. Like I just don't want to deal with this. So yeah, so I struggled to do well. Yeah.
Okay. So do you think your visualization abilities played a role in those obstacles?
Yes. To illustrate the point, like my last class, in order to depart from UConn after 5 years, was Introduction to Nutritional Sciences, where I had to memorize like all the different vitamins and stuff like that. And I was like, good Lord, I'm gonna be here forever. But I ended up utilizing my imagination. So I was like, all right, I got to memorize all these vitamins. How do I do this? Like comic books, let me visualize these vitamins as if they're superheroes. All right, vitamin B12, he's the smart one. So he's like Brainiac. Vitamin B12 and handles all these other things. And he has, his costume looks like this, where he has like these wristbands. One's a plus and one's a minus. And this one has 2 and this one has a 1 because he has a negative electron and then a positive neutron on him or whatever. And like vitamin K is the gut, the gut thing. So he has like, he has he has like a big mouth. He looks like a gigantic monster and he eat things because he has a digestive system. So that type of thing. So I was able to utilize that for that. So much so that when I showed my teacher what I was doing to memorize all this stuff, she was like, can you make this into a comic book and like make it available for like schools? And I was like, yeah, all right. And then I never did it, which I should probably go back to doing that. I have to be perfectly honest. Now that I've revisited in telling this, I'm like, damn, that might actually be pretty fun. We're in the year of superheroes. So I should use my powers for good.
Yeah. So if you were to try to give a general description of how your mind works, how would you describe it?
Oh, that's fun. My brain works in different gears, as it were. Like I don't think it would be right to say that it's always at like this one set state, because it also depends. Our brains, as we behave and function differently depending on our environments, internal and external. Like my brain definitely has different phases. I think I can parse out a couple of them. Golden retriever brain, which I describe as that's where I'm happy. I'm really open, like I'm energetic, I'm playful. I'm not very guarded, or that's kind of the place where my brain is at, where I'm having a good time, where I'm sociable, I'm being around people that I like, where I'm feeling safe and I'm feeling comfortable, where I'm problem solving. That's where like I get a lot of like my fun, good work done. So my brain can be like that when I'm having like those good times. When the exact opposite of that, my brain can be a bear trap. whether that's ADD or ADHD. Speaking of, I was I used to do I have also dabbled in stand up from time to time. One of my opening bits that I was planning on doing when I was going to go back out was that I have ADHD. I grew up with ADHD, and to be perfectly honest, I feel like imposter syndrome because I'm so on squirrels. I don't get the draw. Like, I think they're fine, but like I've never been that excited about seeing one. But I say all that to preface the fact that with ADHD is that it's a pendulum where like you joke about like the squirrels and like, oh, you're all over the place all the time. There's the opposite end of the pendulum where you can hyper focus on something for so long that like you can hunker down and work on a piece of on a drawing for 8 hours, look up and realize, oh, I haven't eaten yet, or oh, I forgot to call so and so. So I liken that to that's bear trap mode. And bear trap mode is where I also have those moments where like, where I lock in on a bad memory and I have to like work through that, and that's the less fun version. I call that when I lose my happy, or at least I used to.
All right. If you woke up tomorrow and had aphantasia, how do you think it would affect your life?
It would change. I think my work and like the things that I would focus on would shift away from the visual and would probably be more on like writing and words, like wordplay. Like I would probably write more than I would draw. I think. I'm not sure. I mean, on the upside, I genuinely think this, and I could be wrong on this, but like I genuinely think I would probably get better sleep. I think I would probably be able to deal with my anxiety a lot better. I think there would be a lot of things that I would benefit from emotionally and psychologically and sociologically from those things.
All right. Well, that is it. Is there anything else you want to say before we sign off?
This has been wonderful. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to interview me. I know we've never met before, but so I know that can be real. That can be really like stressful, just being like, oh, what are we getting into? So I can't tell you enough how enjoyable this was, and I hope you got a lot out of it. And thanks to you for listening. If you're listening, I hope you got a lot out of it too. So,
all right. Well, thank you very much, Brett. It was nice to meet you. It was nice to dig into your brain a bit and hear all of that. It was very, very interesting and very entertaining.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And I was going to say, I wanted to compliment you. A fantastic beard, by the way. That's one that like solid from one beard haver to another.
Thank you so much. I love when people bring that up because I was never happy with the way I looked until I grew that. And I was like, I finally found me. There it is.
Yeah, I know that all too well. I had to hack my beard off when the pandemic happened because I had job shifts. But like my beard, I had a beard that was down to my belly button. It was just that was
wow.
the thing. Yeah, I mean, it got cartoonish. Like it got to a point where it was literally getting caught in things, and like it turned into way too much trouble. But yeah, I'm a big fan of beards, and your beard is mighty, sir.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, follow, and engage with us, and share it with your friends and family as we continue to explore this fascinating subject. For additional information about this episode or Shane's Brain, check out the show notes. Thanks for listening to the Discovering Your Mind podcast. You are beautifully unique.